watching another live show on my YouTube channel. I have an honor to interview Robert Spencer in regard to the Armenian and Greek and Assyrian genocide in country of Turkey among the Ottoman Empire, and we will speak more in regard to that today, and the exile of the Armenian to the east and the west, and the uh, connection to my salvation. I think it would be a great interview and great show for you today. So I'm just going to introduce Robert Spencer. He is the author of several books, many of them that are New York Times bestsellers. I have actually, this is the recent book I have a study here, and I teach from it the history of Jihad, Muhammad, and ISIS. Nothing in regard to Islam has changed, and Robert Spencer has been boldly speaking about it. And I just want to say, Robert Spencer, I'm honored to have you on my show. What a great privilege for me and for the audience it's going to be today for you to speak to us.
The
Thank
honor
you
is
for
all
being
mine.
here.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. And I have followed your work on your channel, on David Wood, and many other apologists and polemics to Islam. So I was born and raised a Muslim, but I think I have learned a lot from you in regard to Islam that I didn't know, that I had to go double check. I'm like, oh my goodness, oh look at another one, and just I just want to say thank you for being here today and sharing your knowledge with our audience.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's
Absolutely,
encouraging to hear. And when you went and
absolutely.
checked, you found that it was all true.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I couldn't find. I mean, um, when I came to faith, I got more. When I came to faith in Christ, actually, I got more interested to know about Islam more and more,
Hmm.
because prior to my faith in Jesus, it was a checklist. As a Muslim, I had to do certain things. I had to follow certain things. I had to traditionally follow and do, and those checklists always, it was in my life, acts of duties. I had to put more good weight on the right side of the scale that I had, and this genie that was on my right shoulder, I wanted to give him a lot to write, but I always failed, and the genie on the left wrote a lot more. And so when I came to faith in Christ and the burden was gone, I could openly and from the outside go and study Islam.
Hmm.
And you, David Booth, Sam Shamoun, and many other helped in this journey a whole lot to educate me about my the faith that I was born into.
Thank God. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
And thank God you were able to get out of it. There's so many people who are enslaved in that system and think that they have to do all those things and check off all those boxes to please Allah. And Allah is never really pleased.
he
And
is
so,
never pleased. Robert Spencer, the more I tried to get closer to him, the more I ran toward him. It was just, he was running away from me.
yes.
It's just like this constant strive of trying to please him was absolutely wearing me down. And I know this with all of my heart. I know this, that it is wearing down a lot of other Muslims around the world. They try to please God, they try to be doing good, but they fail, and then God is just distancing himself from them. And then this strive is already burdening a lot. And then to respond to that, they do a lot of crazy things.
Well, sure, because there's no guarantee of paradise in the Quran except if you kill and are killed.
That's it.
So
That
that
is
people who are tormented by the fear of hell to become more fanatical and to end up killing for Allah and being killed in the process.
absolutely, and that's what I did, and that's what I've been told. I served the Revolutionary Guard of Iran for 2 years. It was my mandatory service, but it was because I was a devout Muslim. They put me in that branch of the army, which is the religious hand of Islamic regime, and I was trained by them. And part of the training was to put you in empty tombs, empty graves of the martyrs of the war between Iran and Iraq. That's how we fought the fear of death, and that's how they prepared us. They said this is how you reunite your spirit with the spirit of martyrdom and jihad. And I have gone through it, so it's not like, oh, there's some outside knowledge. They told us to be pleasing to Allah is to lay your life down.
Hmm.
To be a
Yeah,
good Muslim is to fight against the infidels, against the kafir, against the mushrik, against the enemies of Islam and the country.
and of course, many people have pointed it out, but it's worth noting also in this connection that in Christianity, God lays down His life for the people, and in Islam, the people have to lay down their life for Allah.
Absolutely. And then I was about 5.5 months out of my military service and going to different pilgrimage, the Shia pilgrim sites in Iran, the Eighth Imam and the sister of Hussein. I was going to this pilgrimage to find more about the religion and kind of find purpose for my life. And then I came across a friend of mine that while I was being trained by the Revolutionary Guard of Iran, he converted to Christianity. And
Oh,
then he was bold enough, he was courageous enough, he was loving enough to share the gospel with me, Robert, right when I was a big threat to his life as a trained soldier. And he shared the gospel with me, and he put it very clearly and very simply that he was bruised and beaten for my sake, and his precious blood was shed for my sake. He was crucified. He gave up his life. And if I believe in that, I will have eternal life. And in that moment, it was a veil lifted off of my mind, off of my eyes. I realized all I was trying to do to please Allah, that wasn't working. It is not working because the debt that I'm trying to pay, the payments I'm trying to pay, it's already been paid.
yeah,
And I felt so naked before God, and I realized all of the acts of religious duties, the checkpoints, the things I was doing, the self-flagellating, the cutting of myself, the going through all of these religious duties is nothing but filthy rag before a holy God. And I was so worthless and naked before God, and I just repent, gave my heart to the Lord, and then I want to connect this to the topic we're going to talk about today, Robert, and I'm going to let you talk a whole lot about it because he came to know the Lord. This Muslim man came to know the Lord through his aunt, which the aunt was sitting in a taxi in Tehran, in Iran, and that Armenian pastor talked to her, to this radical Muslim, about faith, about Christianity, about the love of God, and how did Armenians living in Iran for this past century, it's because of the genocide in Turkey. So I want you to please tell us what happened. How did we get Armenians, Assyrians, and of course the Greeks, which is your background? How did that happen that when the Muslim neighbors used to somewhat coexist with the Greek, with the Christians, with the Armenians, Assyrians, how that happened that all of a sudden this terrible genocide happened. All of these people were dispersed to Iran, Armenia, Greek, all of over Europe and even America. Can you tell us what was the cause of this genocide and what did it started everything?
certainly. In the first place, I want to thank you for your very inspiring and beautiful testimony. It's an inspiration. You know, me, I've had it easy. I've always lived in the United States. And so, while I think a persecution of Christians is on the horizon, I'm
Absolutely.
61 years old and I've lived here all my life as a Christian freely. And so, I think all the Christian believers, me included, or maybe me especially, need to learn from you and from others who have converted in a very hostile atmosphere and endured a great deal of suffering for the faith. This is something that all believers have to do. The Lord said, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. But in the West, a lot of us have forgotten all about what exactly that means. And
I don't
so,
think you have forgotten that because you have been persecuted, blocked, I mean, named, name called. I mean, all sort of we are receiving persecution in the West. It is not the same way in Middle East or in a Muslim country that is ruled by Sharia, like where I come from. But I believe, as you say, if the people like you that they have taken the stance, they are exposing Islam, they're exposing the left, they're exposing all these isms in the left. I think they are being persecuted. It's not as severe yet, but
Yes.
it's not like we can talk freely and PayPal let us receive donations.
Yeah, I understand. That's certainly true. Anyway, to your question, in the first place, we should emphasize for those who may not be aware that Asia Minor, the land that is now modern Turkey, is a land that was an integral part of the Eastern Roman Empire, often known as the Byzantine Empire, which existed from time immemorial, really, but the emperors established their capital there starting in the early 300s, and it lasted until 1453. And there were Greeks all through the entirety of Asia Minor, with Armenians also in the eastern part and Assyrians as well. Now, in the year 1071, at the Battle of Manzikert, which is a city or a little town then at that time, in eastern, what is now Turkey, the Eastern Roman Empire, or Eastern Turkey, Anatolia, as it is known also, Asia Minor, there was a great battle between the Ottoman Turks, actually no, the Seljuk Turks in 1071, and the Romans, the Byzantines. And the Romans suffered a terrible defeat, and most of their army was destroyed. The empire continued for several hundred years, but it was vastly weakened, and the Turks had essentially a free hand to expand their hegemony over all of Asia Minor, which they ultimately did, and finally destroyed the empire altogether as I noted, in 1453. Now, when they conquered Asia Minor, most of the people there were still Greek, Armenian, and Assyrian Christians, but they were subjugated under the hegemony of the Muslims as per Islamic law, which mandates, of course, the dhimmi status, second-class status for the non-Muslims. And you have to pay the jizya as specified in the Qur'an, chapter 9, verse 29. You have to accept all manner of humiliating and discriminatory regulations that enforce your second-class status. And all you have to do to be free of it all is convert to Islam, and then you can live freely. And so many people did convert to Islam. And a lot of Turks today are finding, to their horror and shame and rage, that they're actually Greeks. And they are just Greeks who converted to Islam and took Turkish names. But this happened several hundred years ago, and the families have forgotten until they take the DNA test. Anyway, so the Greeks, the Assyrians, and the Armenians lived in Asia Minor, but they were subjugated under the rule of the Muslims. And the Muslims had all the political power and all the cultural hegemony, and the Christians were second class. Now, in 1821, the Greeks in Europe, not the Greeks in Asia Minor, but the Greeks in Europe won their independence from the Ottoman Turks. And after that, the Greeks in the empire were under grave suspicion of being what is known as Kufar Harbi, infidels at war with Islam, because the contract of dimitude, of the dhimma, the subjugation of the non-Muslims, specifies, specifies that the non-Muslims have to accept it. If they rebel, then there is no more protection, so-called. They're not able to live peacefully as non-Muslims in the Islamic State. Their lives are forfeit and they can be killed at will. So the Greeks were under suspicion, the Greeks in the empire, when the Greeks in Europe won their independence. And that's the modern state of Greece. There was great suspicion that the Greeks in Asia Minor wanted to be independent as well and break away from the empire or dissolve the empire and have enosis or unity with the Greeks in what is now Greece. As a matter of fact, the head of the Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox ecumenical patriarch in Constantinople, Gregory V, was murdered by the Turks in the 1820s. I believe it was 1826. But in any case, it was because it was on Palm Sunday, and they suspected that he was in favor of independence. And so they murdered him and they hung the body at the gate of the Ecumenical Patriarchate to frighten the Christians. And it hung there for several days. And now he is considered to be a martyr for the faith, of course. But these independence movements in the empire, they endangered all the Christians because they led the Islamic authorities to take away the protection and to think these are infidels at war with Islam, so they can lawfully be killed. And so this is when the Armenian Genocide began, a little bit later in the 1890s, when the Ottoman authorities thought, and they had good reason to think, actually, because the Ottoman Empire was very weak and was dissolving at this point. They thought that the Armenians were trying to establish an Armenian state. And consequently, they were declared Kufar Harbi, infidels at war with Islam, and began to be murdered wholesale. And there were even imams who would utter the prayer for the sacrifice of a sheep over the Armenians as their throats were slit en masse, many of them at once. Ultimately, the genocide subsided in the late 1890s, but it revived again during World War I, when the Ottoman state was dissolving. And there was at that time the Young Turks, they were called, and they were Turkish nationalists. Now this is kind of paradoxical. The Turkish nationalists were anti-Islam. They didn't believe in Islam. They thought, Kemal Ataturk and the others, they thought that the reason why the Ottoman state was weak and why it was losing World War I was because of Islam, because of various Islamic beliefs and assumptions that had led to a state of societal weakness. And Ataturk wanted to reconstitute a Turkish national state on the basis of no Islam, or actually Islam, but only a cultural, religious Islam, not political Islam. And so he is the founder of modern secular Turkey. Now, paradoxically, this was no relief for the Christians. This made it even worse for the Christians, because Ataturk taught that it was part of this secular Turkish national identity that he was fabricating that you be a Muslim. He didn't want political Islam. He wanted to fashion Turkey after the model of the Western states that were successful and victorious. So he wanted them to be secular with a separation between religion and state, as in the West. But
So, Robert, quick question. Was he the part of the Young Turks himself, Ataturk? Is he the founder of, or no, he was just...
yeah, I believe so. Or if he's not, he certainly identified with them, because it was the Young Turk movement in the late stages of the Ottoman Empire that was pushing for a secular state. So even if Ataturk was above and beyond the Young Turks, he's certainly their standard bearer, the one that they ended up following.
Okay.
So Ataturk said actually Islam was the religion of an immoral Bedouin and was a dead thing. But nonetheless, the secular Turkey he constituted recognized an essential part of citizenship was being Muslim. Not political Islam, but still being Muslim. And so the Armenians, the Greeks, and the Assyrians had no place in the secular Turkish state. Constantinople was 50% Christian in 1914. Now, the Ecumenical Patriarch is still there, and there are just a few hundred Christians left, because it's all been a steady process of Islamization, not just in Istanbul, but all over the country. Yeah. And those Greeks, the Greeks, of course, that's my grandparents were exiled for refusing to convert to Islam. Many of the Greeks did convert to Islam, and that's what the Turks are finding out today, that they're Greeks. And the Armenians also, same thing. Many of them converted to Islam, but others went to Iran, which was right next door, since they were mostly in the eastern part of Anatolia. And many of them in Iran were constituting Armenian churches that remain to this day, because the Islamic Republic even accepts the existence of the Armenian church. As you noted, they're forbidden to preach to Muslims or to proselytize or to do anything in Farsi. They have to do it all in Armenian. They're very much a minority ethnic community, not really full Iranians in the sense that the Islamic Republic understands that. But
And
that's
then,
Armenians.
Robert, Armenians, even though have many of them born second, third generations now in Iran, there are still those unclean Christians. It's amazing. And for us as Iranians, not this generation, our fathers, they would not do business with them. And if they had to, because they had to get, I don't know, some automobile part or something like that, they would go wash everything. And even though it's not an edible thing, it's just amazing that the Armenians, even though they're born and raised in Iran, they have passports, they always, because of their last names, they would be always segregated. They would be always singled out. And they were the unclean. They were the dhimmis of the our society, unfortunately. But just to have a good point in all of this negativity, even that caused them to come to Iran under a monarch at the time, somebody very close thinking to Ataturk. That was the king of the king of Iran. They
Yeah.
came to Iran, took refuge, started their own communities and churches, and then now, as a result of their immigration to Iran, people of Iran have heard the gospel.
Thank God.
Yeah.
It's important to note, I think, in light of what you're saying, that that unclean business is not just something that the Islamic Republic has come up with. That's in the Quran. Chapter 9, verse 28 says that the mushrikeen are unclean. The mushrikeen being those who associate partners with Allah. So a lot of people say, oh, that's just polytheists. That refers to people who have many gods. It doesn't refer to the Christians. But
Christians
actually,
are polytheists to Muslims.
exactly. Yes, the
They have
Christians
three gods.
they associate the
Mary,
they associate in the Quran. They say Jesus and Mary are gods besides Allah. That makes them polytheists. So they're unclean, and this is something that the Shiites particularly take very seriously. And the Ayatollah Sistani, who is of course Iraqi, but he's a leading Shiite Ayatollah, he taught for years openly on his website that he had a list of najis things, of unclean things, and among them were blood, dogs, urine, unbelievers.
and
And so when
Christians, and
they say
yeah,
unbelievers, they didn't want to even touch them. That's absolutely true because it would make them unclean, a Muslim unclean, to have physical contact with an unbeliever. And
we had
even
to go through ceremonial washing every single time. I mean,
yes,
when I was in elementary school, just there was a talk. It's like that there is a Jew family in this alley. Nobody knew they actually were there. It was just a gossip. As an in an elementary school, Robert, I had to walk another mile and a half extra to just go around. Instead of going through this alley to go to school, I had to go all around. And then because they are causing this discomfort for me, I had to curse them.
it's not surprising at all. As a matter of fact, I've heard about all sorts of outlandish regulations in Iran, even during the time of the Shah, long before the Islamic Republic. Jews were forbidden to go out in the rain because the raindrops might bounce off their umbrellas onto a Muslim, and then he would be unclean.
Yep. Yep. I can go in a lot of details when there is a dry unclean and a wet unclean and how you treat different things because the wet is worse. Because anyway, let's go ahead and go back to our uh, Islam is crazy. Let's go back to our conversation in regard to the genocide in the early late 1800s and then early 19th century. And
Yeah,
then the Young Turk came. Go ahead.
well, I have the history of jihad here with me also, and I thought that I would note a couple of things. In 1894, it all started actually when the Armenians, as I noted before, they were considered infidels at war with Islam because they revolted at having to pay taxes because the empire was breaking down. There were Kurdish warlords in eastern Anatolia who were making the Armenians pay taxes, and they were also paying taxes to the Ottoman state. And so they didn't want to pay tax to both. But instead of trying to take action against the Kurdish warlords, the Ottoman state sided with them and attacked the Christians, began massacring them indiscriminately, even Christians. And the chief dragoman, that is the interpreter at the British embassy, actually wrote that all these massacres were guided in their general action by the prescriptions of Sharia law. That law prescribes that if the raya, that is the subject Christian, attempts by having recourse to foreign powers to overstep the limits of privileges allowed to them by their Muslim masters and free themselves from their bondage, their lives and property are to be forfeited and are at the mercy of the Muslims. To the Turkish mind, the Armenians had tried to overstep these limits by appealing to foreign powers, especially England. They therefore considered it their religious duty and a righteous thing to destroy and seize the lives and property of the Armenians.
And it wasn't only Armenians, as you mentioned, but the Armenians were the biggest group. They were absolutely decimated, and then they have the Muslims always when they fail miserably in regard to governing, in regard to ruling, in regard to take control of a place and controlling. When they fail miserably, there's always those Christians or those Jews. If there are Jews, those are number one targets. I mean, it's amazing that growing up in Iran, whatever happened in Iran, whatever economic crisis, what we had earthquakes, we had no matter what happened, the cause was Israel, the Jews, or the great Satan, which is the Christians, according to Islam. And that's how we grow up. And then every day that when we went to schools, they during the physical training early in the morning, which was a pain in the neck. Every morning at 8 a.m. we had to do physical training outside, and then they had the flags of Israel and America. These two nations. That's it, because they both represents two people group, which is the Jews and the Christians. We had to walk on it. And then, for example, when we jump up and down and do like these butterflies, we'd say 1, 2, 3, 4. One, we would say death to the America, death to the. That was our chantings every morning. And then they would say, look, for example, this happened and that happened, and uh, it's the Jews, it's the Christians, it's America, it's the. So I understand this because now the Ottoman Empire is falling apart. They cannot be controlling everything, and it's dissolving. In their context, they looked around, and the Armenians and the Assyrians and the Greek, the Christians, were responsible, and then supposedly they were somehow spying and giving intel to the other, I think to the Russians and other people too, and they find it an excuse. And can you explain the Adnan Mandras' situation? That's because he was a figure in those time, wasn't he?
I'm sorry, who?
Adnan Mandras, the guy that there's an airport under his name. He was a prime minister, I believe. I think
I,
he would be. Um, um, um,
I'm sorry to say it. I don't recall.
I see. Okay, let me tell you what happened during. I think he would have this bells or horns that they would blow in it, and then this Muslim would go into this trance and then kill their neighbors. Do you
Well,
recall that?
yeah. There was a lot of killing the neighbors. There's a very famous story. I don't know if I can find it in the book right now, but I won't take the delay us by searching around for it. But there's a story in the history of jihad of a Turkish family, and they lived next door to Christians for many years. And the one day the wife is recounting that the husband comes home from the mosque and he says, "I have to kill the neighbors." And she says, "What do you mean you have to kill the neighbors?" The imam said, "I have to kill the neighbors. I have to kill the neighbors." And she said, "We've lived next door to them for 40 years. They're our friends. What are you talking about?" And he said, "I have to do it. It's the command of Allah." And he went over and killed them.
Yeah, it's just it's unbelievable, but
Yes.
it's very it happened. It's a part of the history, and unfortunately, till today,
Yes, I'm just going to say the Turkish government refuses to admit that any of this even happened. They say that the Armenians and the others, they died of cholera or typhus. They don't admit to any of the killing.
yeah. And then they supposedly, when they were transferring them, they would die because of sickness and other things, not because they were killed,
Yes.
buried. And many of them were taken to Damascus, isn't that right?
Yes. And they were starving. A lot of them did die along the way because they weren't given any food. They had to walk, the Armenians, from eastern Turkey into Syria, into Iran. And there are even photographs of Ottoman officials holding bread up high and making them jump to try to get it, to just teasing them and torturing them and watching them starve to death.
Absolutely. And it's hard to believe that the country or the region that Apostle Paul came from, Saul of Tarsus. Tarsus is a city now in Asia Minor or Turkey. It's just hard to believe that most of the seven churches of the book of Revelation are all in Western Turkey.
Hmm.
Smyrna, Philadelphia, Laodicea, and all of that, how quickly transitioned from
Yeah.
the birth of Christian missionaries and the greatest apostle among us, that have lived this in the history of the world, to what happened after the invasion of Islam, and to the genocide and the Ottoman Empire and the genocide of the Christians, Armenians. It's just, ama- it's unbelievable.
It is. And people don't know. They don't realize. Uh, I think all too many Christians in the West today, they take for granted that Ephesus and Sardis and Philadelphia, the seven churches in Revelation, the churches of the epistles of St. Paul, they're all in Turkey, in a Muslim country. And they think that this just happened over the long expanse of history as peoples change and time goes by and demographics shift. They don't realize that what we see in that is the result of what we would call an ethnic cleansing, that there was a concerted effort to expel the Christians from the area or to convert them to Islam. And so we see it today in countries such as Nigeria, where there are massacres of the Christians on almost a daily basis, and there are concerted efforts to drive them out of the area in which they live. It is very likely, if nothing is done, that in 100 years or so, those areas of Nigeria will be completely bereft,
Islamicized.
completely Islamized, and people will even be denying that there were any Christians there at all and saying this is the heart of the Islamic world. I say that because my own family was exiled from Turkey during World War One for refusing to accept Islam. I know of a woman whose family had a very similar experience, and she actually took her grandmother back to Turkey in the 1990s to the ancestral village where her grandmother was born and where Christians had lived from time immemorial. And they got there, they looked around, and then they asked some passersby, "Where were the Christians? Where are the Christians' houses? Where are the houses where the Christians used to live when there were Christians here?" And the Turks said to them, "No Christians ever lived here. This has always been Muslim land."
That's right.
And that's what's happened. That's people don't realize that what we think of today as the heart of the Islamic world, Turkey, Syria, Egypt, even North Africa, which is almost completely Islamic, those were all Christian territories. And they did not become Muslim because large numbers of people were convinced by the glories of Islam to convert. They converted because their life was so miserable as non Muslims under the Dhimma that they knew they could get a better life by converting, or else they were killed, they were exiled, they were forcibly converted, and so on. And so you want to know, Egypt was 99% Christian when the Muslims conquered it in the 7th century. Where did all those Christians go? They're still there. They're the Muslims. Over time, these are the people who converted to Islam for whatever reason.
And Robert, there, look, for Christians, sometimes it's when you explain these things, it's hard for them to accept it, like because their mindset, their lenses are Christian, so they say, okay, we have the message of love and tolerance. We have the message of the Son of God has died for your sake, for the sin of the world. And if you believe in this, you will have eternal life. They would think like something like Islam, which has been labeled as an Abrahamic faith, which is a lie from the pit of hell itself.
Yes.
Islam is an anti-Abrahamic faith. That's what it is. But let's not open that can yet. But the thing is that when the Christians, you explain this, you say Islam has no message. Like there is no message. It's not like you can put your hand down and say, this is Islam. This is what Islam means. Islam means one thing, and that's to submit, surrender. To what? To the rule of Islam, to whatever they say. And they can change it and interpret it every day. And then you say, and then we had this issue as Muslim. We say, yesterday you said this is halal, and today you say it's haram. Yesterday was permissible, today is forbidden. Because bunch of Muslim cleric that they are dinosaur age, they sit around, they read the whatever doctrine is out there. God knows where they get them, what translation they're. God forbid all of this. They just go to this jurisprudence, this meetings. They come out with new things every single day. You can't keep up with them, and that's they have these offices, and you're following them, and then you get updates from them. You get their newsletters and follow, and then if you follow them, you follow Allah. And if you don't follow this guy, you're doomed. So there is no message of, okay, there's a unified message. All the message I can, as a former Muslim, put my hand on, surrender. That's it.
Yes.
Surrender to my sword. Even if you're a Muslim, you have to surrender to their sword. Or otherwise, you'll be persecuted worse than the infidels by them.
Yes, it's all submission. The Muslim men submit to the ulama, the Muslim women submit to the Muslim men, the Christians submit to the Muslims.
That's it.
Everything is submission.
That's just goes down and it gets worse. At the end of the day, it's the few on the top, the Muslim clergy, the Ayatollahs, the sheikhs, the Ayatollah Sistanis and Khomeinis and all of that, they're enjoying the party.
Yes.
And then the rest of the Muslims are absolutely miserable. They're burdened, guilt tripped every single day with new rules and new laws and new books and things of that nature that they have to keep up. And then as soon as they open something to read it, oh, you don't understand. You have to come to us. It's amazing. We had a Farsi translation of the Quran. We do have a Farsi translation, but we couldn't read it. They say you wouldn't understand. We're like, it's Farsi. What can't we understand? Because Allah only honors you if you do it in Arabic, meaning don't understand it in the beginning. So I have so much Robert Spencer to talk about, but I just want to go to uh, this genocide situation in the exile, and 100 years later in Iran, an Armenian pastor, somebody that was exiled because of this genocide, because of this ethnic cleansing, they end up in Iran. They were forced to Iran. They don't live in the best situations, but even that, he decides to share the gospel, and with a Muslim woman, she gets saved. She decides to share it with her nephew. Her nephew got saved. I got saved, and I tell you, hundreds, God knows, thousands of people are getting saved. And I hope one day I can go back and thank this pastor, Armenian pastor, and I say, look, all you and your generation has suffered. Look, it is being turned for good, and Iranians are converting in droves. Robert, it's a true. I know sometimes we hear things, so many things we hear in the news, and it's hard to believe with everything that is, with all the misinformation and all the propaganda that exists in the Western ministries and in Western news outlet and all of that. But the revival in Iran is real. I'm a part of it. I came to know the Lord in 2006, but after all of what has happened this past 20 years, it's just Iranian Muslims. They decided that this religion belongs to the Bedouin 7th century barbaric people, and it doesn't belong to the Iranians. And they're converting in droves to first Christianity. There's a lot of New Age whack stuff that is coming out of Iran, but Christianity is number one religion or faith. Let's not call it religion, faith that they're converting to.
Yes, it's very heartening to see the protesters over the last few months in Iran, and they're saying we don't want an Islamic Republic. There have been protests in Iran before, but we never heard that.
Nope.
And so it's very clear. I don't think that the regime can possibly last indefinitely. I don't know when it will fall, but I know that they still have all the weapons, they have all the guns and so on. But at the
Yes.
same time, they've lost the people. And most people in Iran not only are disgusted with the regime, but are disgusted with Islam itself because they understand that everything the regime does is based on Islam. A lot of Westerners don't realize this and they think, oh, that's a twisted version of Islam that Ayatollah Khomeini came up with or someone, and that it doesn't really correspond to the true religion. And the Iranians know better, and they've had enough of Islam, and so this is very heartening.
And it's absolutely true. This past year, because of what happened to Mahsa Amini, the death of that Kurdish girl, I mean, she shook this this 21-year-old, 22-year-old girl shook the foundation of the Islamic regime in Iran. I mean, it's fascinating.
Yes.
The We had so many Iranians go to the shrines and go to the mosque and defecate there. This has never, ever has happened.
Yes.
No matter what you would tell the Iranians, they had this honor for Islam. The core of Islam is good. There's some bad apples out there. Now they have realized it.
Mhm.
And what this Islamic regime has done to the Iranians, Iranians hate God. We, Robert, we as a ministry, as a team of Iranians that we love our country and love to see Iranians convert, we go and distribute Bibles, and we go and talk to thousands of Iranians. The first thing when we hand them a New Testament, the first thing they say, we don't want a religion. Thank you so much. Islam was the best religion. This is what they say. And the result is garbage. And you'll come with a lesser religion such as Christianity, and then we had a great opportunity to tell them that we're not offering you religion.
Mhm.
We're offering you a relationship with God separated from clergy, because that's what they're disgusted with.
Yes.
So it is changing. It is truly changing. I don't know if you saw the survey done among 50,000 Iranians that less than one third now they claim to be Shia Muslims.
Yes, very heartening.
Yep.
Of course, many of them, they are just answering in the way that they think they should so that they don't get any negative attention from the authorities. And
That's
so likely the number is much higher even than that.
Yep. And we talk to them, it's much less. Many of them, when they're not in the public and you talk individually with them, they're open to tell you they hate Islam, they hate anything Islamic, they hate anything Islamic regime. So it is changing, and by God's grace, Christianity will be filling that gap between them and anything spiritual. So, Robert, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on this program and sharing. And let me
Thank you.
tell people about this book, The History of Jihad from Muhammad to ISIS. If you, some of the stuff that we talked about jihad, about the ethnic cleansing, about the Armenian and the Greek genocide, you can find it in this book. You can find it in jihadwatch.org or Robert Spencer's website. I will, the link's already in the description so you can get this book. And you can find more of these books that Robert Spencer has wrote on his Amazon, and you can purchase it there. I will highly recommend. We're not in a time that you could be naive and gullible. You need to be educating yourself. The second coming of the Lord is close, and I believe that with all of my heart. 10 years ago, it was hard to believe, but now, with everything that is going on, the Lord is coming back, and you need to be a bold and courageous Christian.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
Amen. Thank you so much, Robert. God bless you, and hope we find some other times and some other topics that we can talk about.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
God bless you, brother. Thank you, and have a great day.
Too.